Chapter 9. Just for a fraction of an instant, Joan, Brandon, and Derek froze, staring at their old classmate in shock. Then they leaped into action. Brandon dropped the key, letting it clatter to the tile floor, and rushed to kneel beside Veronica, feeling her neck for a pulse, and then stooping to listen to signs of breathing. Joan raced around the table, heading for the cabinet where she kept the portable defibrillator she had bought after her last CPR class. Derek scooped up the key from where it had fallen, moving it across the room in case proximity was a factor. As Joan began to ready the defibrillator for use, Brandon started performing chest compressions. Derek grabbed Joan's cell to dial 911. No more than 10 seconds after her collapse, Veronica's body convulsed and she gasped, her lungs suddenly pulling in air. She bolted upright, her eyes wide and darting around frantically, and grabbed Brandon's shirt, pulling him off balance. He crashed onto his side beside her, and she released him, swinging her arms wildly, groping blindly at her surroundings. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. Joan grabbed Veronica's arms and lowered them to her lap before she did any more damage to Brandon. Derek set down the phone and joined them on the floor, helping Brandon up. "Veronica, can you hear me?" Derek asked. She moved her hands to his face, feeling its contours as though confirming its reality. Her mouth snapped shut and she nodded her head. Her breathing was quick and frightened, but her face calmed somewhat, and she dropped her hands to her lap once more. Brandon took hold of one of them to lend what comfort he could. Derek continued his questioning. "I'm going to assume you can't speak or see. Is that correct?" She nodded again, tears forming in her unseeing eyes, spilling down her cheek, and she sobbed silently. "Do you feel any other physical symptoms at all? Headache? Nausea?" Veronica paused, checking in with her body, and then shook her head. Joan felt tears of her own gathering, part terror and part relief. After all, cursed Veronica was better than dead Veronica, right? She stood and walked to the laptop to check her vitals. "It's now showing signs consistent with the tests run on the two of you," she remarked quietly. Derek got up and joined her, as Brandon continued to comfort Veronica, putting an arm around her shoulders as she silently cried. They watched the graphs, no one speaking. The levels fell slowly, exactly as they had when Derek had undergone the test. Just when the lines reached normalcy, they heard an audible sob, and Veronica lifted her head, a look of intense relief crossing her face. "I can see! Oh my God, I can talk!" "Veronica!" Joan gasped, rushing back to her side. Veronica struggled to stand, and Joan and Brandon helped her to her feet. "Can you get these damn sensors off of me?" "Yes!" Brandon and Joan began to remove the machines. Joan heard the door creak open and turned to see Derek walking out into the yard. He returned a moment later with Sadie in tow. "Holy crap, Veronica, are you okay?" Sadie's voice was strained, her face creased with worry as she hurried toward Veronica. "Her test didn't quite go as expected," Derek said. "She's fine now, though, as you can see, so go ahead and draw her blood." "Are you crazy?" Joan stopped with her hand an inch from the sensor as she was about to unhook, her head snapping around to stare at Derek. "She fucking died." "She died?" Sadie spun on the balls of her feet and shoved Derek backward. "You asshole! Were you even going to mention that?" "It's not as though you're going to take a pint of blood. Just take a sample. They would do it in an ER." "That's different. These tests aren't diagnostic and life-saving. Her blood is staying put." Sadie stomped a foot for emphasis, and then she whirled around again, heading straight for Veronica and enveloping her in a comforting embrace. Veronica clung to her as Joan and Brandon continued to pull electrodes off her skin and removed her helmet, working around the hugging pair. Finally, Veronica pulled away from Sadie. "Thank you. I needed that. These guys can't hug worth a damn." Sadie laughed, tugging Veronica by the hand and guiding her toward the door. "You're telling me. Come on, you're going to get some rest now." Derek opened his mouth to protest, shutting it tightly as Sadie glared at him. He pursed his lips as he watched them leave slowly, Sadie supporting Veronica step by step. Joan leaned against the table, arms folded. "That's the end of the night, for sure." Derek faced her, squaring his shoulders. "You can't be serious. If anything, this highlights the need to keep going." The door opened and Beth charged in. "Veronica died? She died? And the curse came back? Is it true?" Ed followed closely behind. "We're not doing any more tests, are we?" Beth whirled, nearly colliding with him. "What on earth are you talking about? We have to find out if that was a fluke or not." Derek cleared his throat. "Beth's right. If Veronica was having cursed symptoms before this, and she had a more severe reaction to the key, we need to find out if the two are related. Beth, we're going to need to test you next." "We'll wait just a minute," Beth faltered. Ed gave a sardonic huff. "Oh, so you want to risk anyone's life but yours. Typical." "We're not risking anyone's life at all," Joan declared, "and we're not doing anything more tonight. This is insane. Most of us are exhausted. Derek's potentially on speed. It's time for all of us to take a step back, get some rest, and come back to it tomorrow morning. First thing tomorrow morning, Derek insisted. Fine. Ed pulled the door open with a scowl. See you guys tomorrow. Beth narrowed her eyes at Joan. My coat's in your living room. It sounded like an accusation, as though Joan was a notorious garment thief. Joan nodded once, curtly, and walked out the door and back to her house. Brandon followed, Beth trailing behind. Derek remained in the lab, presumably to tidy up his instruments. Joan didn't really care what he did. She could feel all of her emotions draining into a great black hole of exhaustion. Beth's brown wool coat was laying on an armchair, and Beth picked it up and tossed it to her. She caught it and shrugged it over her shoulders. Tell Veronica I hope she feels better. I'll see you guys tomorrow. First thing. Sure. See ya. Beth left, and Joan made a beeline for her favorite chair and lowered herself down into it, sinking into the cushion. She tipped her head back up to look at Brandon. He grimaced at her and sat on the edge of the coffee table, his legs stretched out beside the chair. Hey, she said hollowly. You gonna be okay? I don't know, babe. I don't even know what that was. She held out a hand and he squeezed it. His voice sounded dull and tired. I've never given CPR to an actual human, just a dummy. Me too. You did great, though. Did I? She's alive, right? A weary smile appeared on his face. She is. She's alive. You saved her, dude. You saved a fucking life tonight. I am a fucking hero. You're my fucking hero. Joan felt herself relaxing. She gave him a teasing smile. You know what heroes get? He stared into her eyes and her heart beat faster. Ticker tape parades? No. She leaned forward, her face next to his, lips almost touching. Heroes get kisses, she whispered. And then her lips were on his, and she melted into the kiss, completely losing herself, totally forgetting that she wasn't supposed to allow herself to be distracted. She was rudely pulled back to reality at the sound of a throat clearing. Somehow she was on his lap again, straddling his legs. Joan jumped up, cursing. Damn it, Sadie, don't you ever knock? Knock on what? She laughed. There's no door to this room. And how was I supposed to know you two would be in here necking? There are children present, Joan smiled weakly at Sadie's gaping middle schoolers. Sorry, kids. That's okay, said Becca. When Mom was dating Seth, we saw... Okay. Sadie put a hand on each kid's back and scooted them toward the door. We are going home now. She handed Marlon her car keys. Get it all booted up for me. I'll be right out. How is she? Joan asked. She's shaken, but I think she's going to be fine when she gets some rest. Thank goodness. Will you be able to come back tomorrow morning? Yeah, I'm working afternoon shifts, so I'll be here as soon as I drop the kids off at school. Sadie grabbed Joan and Brandon's hands and guided them together. Now go back to what you were doing. And with a knowing grin, she was gone. Sadie was the worst buffer ever.